impressed that they found some clips of you because Philippe doesn't do a lot of media, so we're very lucky to have him. This is a treat. Thank you for having me as well. Philippe, I was so excited to talk to you today because not only do you not do a lot of media, but also you're at the center of so much of what is driving the market right now and what is driving conversations around the market, the big AI companies, the coming IPOs. And what's so interesting is when I was reading about you before this, and we've known each other, but I reminded myself that not only did you study economics, but you also actually studied software engineering, correct?
Yes. I mean, I've said the story before, but I'll go through a very, very quick background. I was an undergrad and grad at MIT, and I was studying computer science, and I only wanted to work for Apple. And I had 5 job interviews when I graduated from grad school, and 5 rejections. And that's how I ended up.
Why do they reject a guy from MIT?
I'm not a very good computer scientist, clearly.
Turns out you were a better investor.
But I got into the investment business, and if any of you guys want to come and visit us in our office, I have this ginormous museum of every Apple product, including the ones that don't work. And whenever the Apple management comes, I point. See? We would have done better if I'd been there. But anyway, look, it's been a
Did you buy Apple stock instead?
You know, in 2000, I've only had 5 good ideas in 25 years.
Really?
It's my 27th year doing this. When we started the fund, we had 50 million, and today we have almost 100 billion. So it's been a long ride, but I've only had 5 good ideas, and I feel that in technology, you have to think about the big trends. And in my case, we had the PC got networked, then we got the internet, then we got the mobile internet because we wanted it in our pocket, then we wanted some apps, so we had cloud computing to have the apps, and then today we have AI, and AI seems to be such a big trend, obviously, and yes, we are a little bit at the center of everything, but last time I felt at the center of everything was in 1999. So I'm a little bit worried. I don't enjoy feeling at the center of everything.
But what was that one of your big ideas? One of your best ideas, 1999?
In 99, we recognized that we were probably in a bubble, so we survived. After that, we invested in a lot of internet names. Then we switched to mobile internet, and we got Apple. And I feel like in the investment world, you think about a macro trend, and then when you latch onto one, you peel the onion, and there's 50 layers. So when you think that Apple becomes big, it has so many implications on everything. And today, obviously, the big one is AI.
Right. So are we in a bubble today?
I would say...
Usually I work my way up to that, but since you mentioned 1999.
I would say 80% that we're not, and 20% that we are. I think the biggest differences around why not being in a bubble is that the people funding the AI capex, it's these companies that generate about $1 trillion of EBITDA a year, every year, and have no net debt on their balance sheet.
The hyperscalers.
So the hyperscalers. So very different than during 1999 when it was the retail and the financial markets that were financing. That said, you're seeing the financial markets. Google just issued 80 billion. There's a little bit of debt, very, very small amount of debt on the scale of things. So the capital markets are becoming a little bit more involved. And then the other part is the P multiple is, let's say, 20 times, 21 times. During 99, the P was like 50 or 60. Now, the 20% where we could be in a bubble is what if stocks are cheap because the earnings have been front-loaded, and at some point the earnings melt. And so we're thinking about earnings that are not sustainable. That would be the other argument.
And for those, I mean, I'm sure everybody here knows what Coatue does, but you play in the public market and the private market, correct?
Yes.
How do you...
Our assets are split about 50-50. But I think that the way to invest in the future is you have to invest in publics and privates. You have to be willing to be different. There are times where we've held 80% cash in our fund, not fully invested at all times. I think risk management matters. And I think those are all the things that one should do. And if you think about it, who was the best guy that had a lot of cash, a lot of publics, and a lot of privates? It was Berkshire Hathaway.
Warren Buffett.
And nobody asks, Warren, why do you hold on to so much cash? Or why do you have this in public, this in private? And in particular, the thing that bothers me the most with the public markets is they've completely surrendered their intellectual creativity and intellectual capability to the indices. And the indices, they're decided by like bureaucrats that live in the basement of MSCI and the basement of, S&P. And how is it possible that we're allowing these people to tell us what we should invest in the future? And I think this is all disguised under the fact that the fees are low, but you're basically dying by 1,000 cuts. And so I feel, hopefully, the way we invest at Coatue and our success is almost by thinking all the things that other people do that don't make sense, and just hopefully by doing those, it's like 75% of the work.
So how do you do that with a market now that you have just kind of trashed?
Yes. So,
like, what do you like?
let's say that AI turns out to be a really big deal.
Which you think?
Which is, we said 80% that it's going to be a big deal. And I think it's going to be a big deal for the next 10 years, not just that like in 1 year it's catastrophic and it's over. There'll be ups and downs, but these trends that I spoke about, they last 10, 12 years on average. So we're probably 2 years into a 10 plus year, 10 plus trend, right? So let's say that you like AI a lot. You may just say, well, look, the basic unit that makes AI work is semiconductors. So I would like to have a lot of semiconductor exposure. On top of it, you could say that these AI models, one of the things is, the way I think about these AI models is they're like digital 3D printers, i.e. they can replicate anything that's digital. So you could tell a model, here's a big book that describes how Excel works, write a piece of identical software to Excel, and in a few hours, you get it. So if that's the case, you could say, whoa, that could be very bad for software. So now why am I letting the MSCI guy decide that my semiconductor weight has to be 19% and my software weight has to be still 30%?
So you do your own MSCI.
We do our own MSCI.
Yeah.
And you can do that on the public side, and then on the private side, you have to go and think, like, what are going to be the companies that in essence will be part of the Nasdaq in 5 to 10 years? And there you have time to front run the indices, because since they don't want anything that has any hair, and they don't want to invest in any companies that are losing money, and sometimes you have to lose money to establish your number 1 or number 2 position, then maybe we can invest in those before.
So that is Anthropic, OpenAI.
In our case, you know, we own Anthropic, we own OpenAI, but there's a lot of other interesting companies. One that people don't talk a lot about, but I think could also become $1 trillion is Revolut. I think that Revolut is like this. Nobody has been able to replicate Bank of America or JP Morgan yet in the digital world. I think there will be a super large digital bank of some sort, because if you have one software that works in every country and you don't need any branches, then presumably you're going to have a great cost advantage. And I think that could be Revolut.
Do you think that these companies are worth $1 trillion and people should buy them when they IPO? Because you got in early.
Yes. So.
Is that a yes?
No, that's when I go so, it means, Sarah, good question, but I'm not going to answer exactly what you're asking me.
All right, I'll ask it a different way.
Yes.
What assumptions do you have to make to get to $1 trillion in valuations for an Anthropic?
So, yes, I will answer precisely that, but let me just start with this. Before, people talked about the Mag 7. And in essence, the Mag 7, it was the 7 largest companies in the world, and at one point, they all became worth $1 trillion. I think that today, It depends on the day. There's probably close to 20 companies that are worth $1 trillion. It's the Max 7, but you've got TSM, Hynix, Samsung, Micron. So you've got the rise of some big semiconductor companies.
Are you in all of those?
We are in some of them, but I can't disclose all my secrets, Sarah. There's also some 2, 3, 4 trillion-dollar companies. I think Nvidia is 5. So now the question is, let's say the market cap of the world today is about 70 trillion. Let's say that in 10 years, of the US, and the market cap of the world, I think, is 130 trillion. The wealth of the world is 500. I always like to attach myself to key numbers. And obviously, the rest of the wealth would be real estate and, other things like that. So in 10 years, maybe the market cap of the US is 150, and maybe the market cap of the world is 300. It would be 7% per year for the next 10 years. So could you have a $10 trillion company back then? Could you have $5 trillion companies out of either 140 or 300? Meaning, like, could a company become 3 to 5% of either the US or the world equity index? I'm like, yes. And so now the next question is, well, what kind of companies could do that? And then the question becomes, do you think a company that provides intelligence could become one of the largest companies of the world in 10 years? And I don't think there's going to be that many companies that can provide intelligence. And on the subject of intelligence, I think that as the industrial societies, have grown, the way you can measure industrial society is like how many utilities do you have? So water became a utility, electricity became a utility, broadband became a utility, gas and energy are utility. I think intelligence is going to be like the 5th utility. And so for $50 to $200 a month, all of us, our kids, our grandkids, are going to be incredibly intelligent. And it's going to be a utility to be intelligent. What's not going to be a utility is judgment, courage, intuition, loyalty. There are many other ways that we can distinguish ourselves, but the basic thing of intelligence is going to be utility. And so the question is, can Anthropic or OpenAI or maybe another one someday, 10 years down the road, be worth 5 to 7 trillion? And I don't know. But the reason why I don't care is because if I've got a portfolio of them, then at least I've constructed something that luck is on my side. And I think the key in the money management is try to build a portfolio where the luck is on your side. And could Anthropic be worth 5 or 7 trillion in 10 years? Absolutely. There's a chance. Now, maybe it doesn't work, but hopefully I'll be able to adjust if that's not the case. But I'm happy that at least I own an option into that future.
It's like diversification, but within one sector.
Yes. I like to diversify because, first, I'm wrong a lot. B, I don't have a crystal ball. But the part that underlines what I really believe in is that the AI is going to fundamentally change so much of what's going on. It's not just AI. There's other trends like in space. I think space is going to change broadband. I think the whole telecom infrastructure is going to go to space. If you think about space, what's amazing is a satellite. Right now, we're probably 1 mile away from my phone to a tower. And on a highway, I could be as far as 30 miles away from my phone to a tower. If I'm in a car in the middle of Arizona, something like that, maybe 40. A satellite is only 200 miles away. And space is infinite. There's no zoning, there's very little regulation. I think all the telecom infrastructure of the world, the undersea cables, the fiber optics, the cable, the wireless is going to move to the sky, which, by the way, has very bad implications for wireless companies, for charter, cable companies, for
anything land-based.
Anything that's land-based. Now, they might be able to adapt. They'll change. Some companies, they don't let just the future happen and do everything about it. But if I was a CEO of that company, I would definitely think, wow, I need the option value in case that world
they are partnering.
Happens.
Does that mean you should buy SpaceX when it goes public on Friday?
Like, I don't know if it's like, the problem with my framework, and you saw that, is I'm never sure what something is worth today. So if you tell me like, is SpaceX today worth 1 trillion? Maybe. Is it worth 3? Yeah, maybe. And is the IPO going to be at 2?
Right.
Probably.
Well, you can't value it off of the current metrics. And
but it's very difficult. But where I've been able to make most of the money is I try to view myself as a growth investor, and I think a growth investor is someone who wants to be a value investor in 10 years. So the most important thing for me is to think, what could the earnings of SpaceX be in 10 years? And if it's really, really cheap in 10 years, then I can own some today, and I can own more if it goes down, and I can sort of survive along the way. And so I don't really know what it's worth today, but I could paint the fact that it could be worth a lot today, a lot in the future. And one way that I think is useful is to always say the opposite, which is to say, oh, I know it's so obvious that SpaceX is so overvalued. This is total fucking bullshit. It's so expensive. But to say, but why is many people in the market think that it actually is worth 2 trillion? What is it that they see that I don't? And I found that that line of thinking, at least, has been able to get me out when I'm like sort of stuck in in a bad space.
I was going to ask how you get smarter on this stuff. Like how you have a thesis on space, on AI, on all, like how do you learn about it, and who do you listen to?
I found that there's a reason. Obviously, I spoke to you guys about it at the beginning, why engineers don't necessarily make good financiers. And it's very clear that a decent or good financier can make for a very bad engineer. And so I think that the thing as an investor is don't get bogged down in the details and think about the big picture. So in the case of space, I'm just thinking like, look, could mining move to space? Could tourism move to space? Could telecom move to space? Could real estate move to space? Whatever, right? And I think it's just you have to be creative. You have to be a little bit imaginative, but you don't need to get lost. Like some investors are really good and they can tell you the 19 different chips of Nvidia and why is the Rubin different than the previous one, which I don't even know, than the current one that I also forgot the code name of the current one.
Blackwell.
Blackwell. There you go. But I do know that the Nvidia, it's like chip, it's like a neuron. And all the connectors of the chip, it's like a synapses. And why the AI is so powerful now is we have gotten rid of this very dumb CPU-based, which is like the old calculator, this dumb computer fabric, and we're reinventing this computer fabric that looks much more like a brain. That, I feel, is like the big idea, and not to get lost in the details.
But when you're talking about multi-trillion-dollar companies changing the way we think and we live and we operate, leadership really matters. So I wonder what you look for in some of these founders and CEOs that you invest in early that you think are just going to change the case of history.
So
the course of history.
It's a 2x2 matrix. One axis is it like an amazing, imaginative, futuristic company? And the other, it's like, no, it's like a boring company. So you could say one is a Coca-Cola and one is a SpaceX. And then the other matrix is this like an incredible leader, or is this like not such a good leader? And I have not found that there's a correlation necessarily in that the qualities of the leader change in time. So there was a time where I thought that all the good leaders were very charismatic, or they were people with amazing communication skills. But today in this world, it seems like the amazing leaders, like maybe you could say Elon, he's not an amazing leader in the old way of measuring things. But in the new way, he problem solves and debugs stuff. He works every day, every night. He knows every little thing about engineering. He has incredible employee turnover, but so what? So
Vision.
It's really difficult, and I think behind your question, it's about how you measure leadership, and leadership changes, and there's no way that the GE Jack Welch leadership of the past is what matters now. So that's the tough part behind your question.
But there's a societal thing too that's going on. I'm thinking more of Anthropic and OpenAI and just how these leaders are going to deal with political pressures, ethical questions, societal questions.
Yes.
I mean, is that something you think about?
Yeah, I do, and I'm worried because you see Bernie Sanders, who has decided that he thinks that we should take half of
Nationalize.
Anthropic, nationalize. And I was like, damn, that's why I left France. I didn't think these ideas existed in the USA. Now a tax rate might be even higher in the US than in France or some European countries. But I think that the astute leaders, and this is the one quality that may be much more than the communication, charisma, or leader that I look for, is people that can adapt and survive. And in different times, adaptability is different. Right now, people are worried about what AI means. I'm worried about what AI means. And so we have to respond to those worries. We can't just say some sort of absolute way. And so these leaders, they're going to need to change and adapt. I think that it's not true at all that AI is going to get rid of jobs. I think that usually why you can't find a job is because you have no skills. And by my definition, with intelligence, you're going to be really clever, really fast. So if you're clever, you should be able to find a job easier than if you're not. So I'm pretty optimistic about the future, but we need to find ways to include society. The government should be highly involved in AI, but hopefully not nationalizing the companies either.
Nationalizing is one thing, but there's also, and we've seen this from the administration, taking equity stakes in companies like Intel. Is that appropriate for AI companies?
When the US took the equity stake in Intel, so the CEO of Intel, he had been an advisor of Coatue.
Oh, Lip-Bu,
for 7 years. And I was like, God, first of all, look, the government, they think they know more than me about Intel. How silly are they? And they cut the deal in like 24 hours. And
turns out it was a really good
That deal was at 20, and I think I started buying maybe some Intel at 80. So look who was the dumb one.
And where is it now? Like one?
Excuse me?
Where is it now? 130?
I think now it's like at 100 or 110.
Yeah.
And
well, you both did well.
So things change. And the government can make very good decisions because the government has a view around geopolitics and the fact that semis need to be built in the US, and then maybe investors, they don't understand some things. So I think that's what happened there.
What has been, over your career, your biggest home run?
Biggest home run?
You said 5 good ideas.
I think the biggest home run is that we have had always good risk management, and I attribute it to a quality that nobody believes in. But when I arrived in the US, I was an American, and I was like, this is an amazing country. I don't want to do anything that I get shipped out. So for me, being careful was second nature. Second part is I started January 1st, 2000. Anybody that wasn't careful got wiped out. And for me, surviving 00, 01, and 02 to this day is like a tattoo that I have.
How did you do that?
And I can never... Well, back then I was a good analyst, but a very bad portfolio manager. But the part that I had that was lucky is I always tried to meet all the other portfolio managers. And to this day, I'm very connected, and I always speak all the time to everyone. And so while I don't always have very good ideas myself, I have a good sense of why different people think different things. And I felt that for me, being outgoing, but also being careful by nature, it was like my way of ensuring that I could stay in the US for a long time. And so maybe that's why I took a little bit less risks and was a bit careful. But that adaptability, at the end, I'm still around 27 years later, and I don't know if I have 27 years left. I'm 58, but
I think you
why
do.
not? I could potentially work till 85.
But are you as careful? Because I feel like your portfolio is growth, is risk, right?
My portfolio is growth and in risk, but the way I would answer that would be it's not always like that. Sometimes I have a lot of cash, sometimes I have a lot of hedges, and also I might be less risky than someone who's not in growth because they're going to die from 1,000 cuts. Whereas if I can survive the bounces, I'm being pulled by this fast-paced train. And so that's also an advantage. So it cuts both ways to be in growth. Sometimes I would say that the people who have the bad portfolio is the value guys who are all in, private credit and real estate and other areas that are not as involved in defining the future as the areas that I invest in.
Are you in anywhere outside of tech?
We think more about innovation than tech. So there's innovation in many sectors, not just tech. Sometimes it's not obvious, but we do some stuff in healthcare. We do some stuff in maybe real estate around data centers, which I would view as real estate for tech. So I think we cover 85% of the S&P. So that gives you a sense we're pretty broad.
Is Bitcoin still growth and innovation?
I have a schizophrenic relationship with Bitcoin. When it goes up, I wake up at 3 in the morning and I'm like, why do I not own any Bitcoin? And then when it goes down, I'm like, well, that's why. And in general, my view of Bitcoin is I'm much more interested in the rails and in the stablecoin. And I've always thought that Bitcoin was the answer. It was the relief valve to my theory around BlackRock and Vanguard. That if BlackRock and Vanguard control all the sheeps, Bitcoin was the one escape valve while there were no IPOs. And then this would explain why as you now have SpaceX and other IPOs coming, potentially that could be a big risk to Bitcoin because those people that want to speculate or that want to be in another part of the market will now have a new instrument to basically that you can invest through. So I'm negative Bitcoin, and also in general, I'm always, every time I say I'm negative something, we're near the bottom. So you guys can decide.
Are you allowed to share what your best idea is right now? Highest conviction.
My highest conviction idea is to decide what your risk tolerance is, and it could be 0% of your portfolio all the way up to 100. And once you've decided what the risk is to make bets where you'll be able to look back in 10 years and say, that was a courageous bet that I made thinking that the world was going to change at a much faster pace in the next 10 years, and it was a good bet. That's my best idea.
That wasn't an answer.
That's the
Is that SpaceX?
That's the answer you're going to get.
OpenAI, Anthropic, all of the above?
Oh, it's a 0-0.
We're out of time.
Thank you very
Philippe,
much.
thank you so much for being so candid.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.